Alright, the next film I'm reviewing is one I never thought would ever get remade in a million years. The Last House on the Left was originally a 1972 film which marked the debut of the master of horror himself, Wes Craven. It was a really sick, twisted, and downright disturbing film back then. Yet its point was there, and the reactions of the characters and their mannerisms in a frightening way made a lot of sense, matching the traits they possessed. I gave the film a good rating. Now that said, I'd be fine if I'd never seen it again. But then came this remake, yes, another horror remake, and I have to say, I was curious. I was very curious. I was even considering skipping it though, but I can't bash the movie unless I've seen it. And much like most horror remakes lately, what I got was a very ambitious, well made, and surprisingly well acted effort that was effective in what it tried to accomplish. That said, cliche after cliche after cliche. Every mindless gore trick was very present in this film. Now, the story revolves around a couple played by the very talented and beautiful Monica Potter and Tony Goldwyn, whose daughter, played by the surprisingly effective Sarah Paxton, best known for her roles in teen films such as Aquamarine or Sydney White, meets up with a friend, and they soon find themselves kidnapped and in danger at the hands of a prison escapee and his gang. And some of the stuff that follows is just downright horrifying, not even in a horror movie sense, but just the acts in general. The 1972 film showed it for what it really was, a true, reprehensible, unbearable act. While this film, I was just trying to gross us out and mortify us. I thought the original had a little more substance in that aspect. Now, one of the few horror remakes that I've enjoyed over the years is The Hills Have Eyes. But there was one scene in that film, I think you all know what scene I'm talking about, that I just to this day cannot stomach. I would have to. I always have to skip over it or walk away if I watch it again. It it's just one of those things that I know sometimes it's part of the plot of a movie, but in that particular film, I actually found it to be unnecessary to the plot. Creating the illusion of it, I think, is more effective than actually getting graphic. And to me, it's just one of the most reprehensible, deplorable acts committed in the world. And sadly, it does happen a lot, which is why I believe we don't have to get so graphic with it in some of these films. I wish that the filmmakers would have really filmed these scenes in a way where it just didn't have to be like that. Um, and of course, so after all that, after my little rant there, um, I gotta say that one big change in this film, however, from the original is that the girls don't. I don't want to give too much away, but basically what happens to them in the original doesn't happen here, and that really changes. That really kind of threw me for a loop. I mean, I'm not saying I'm disappointed. I'm just saying I wasn't expecting that. Um, and the sickos certainly think that they've accomplished what they set out to, and they unknowingly take refuge at the house of the parents. But when the parents find out, what follows is not only gruesome, but in the eyes of some people, might deem as justifiable if you can believe that. And then again, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not one to make judgments. But regardless, despite the ambition of this film, I just knew what was coming left and right, like I did with Friday the 13th, which I reviewed on the last show. But better acting here. But the reason why I still thought this wasn't even as good as Friday the 13th was that the disturbing scenes and parts of this film just were not substantiated the way they should have been. The genre of horror has been in a much worse state than it is now. I feel, though, however, the brilliance is almost gone from it once again, but the vision is still there. These remakes keep coming out, and with the exception of The Hills Have Eyes, which I only gave a marginal recommendation to, due to the fact that because it just flowed very well and kept my interest, and I also love the high energy originality of 2004's Dawn of the Dead. I have not liked one single horror remake outside of those movies in the last decade. And let's even talk about other horror films. Like for example, the first Saw films were, or the first Saw film I should say, was brilliant. But now the franchise took a quicker dive and it's deader than the Friday the 13th one was. Um, and whenever it takes the horror films take one step up, the genre takes two steps back. Rob Zombie made the mind-blowingly tremendous masterpiece known as The Devil's Rejects, but then made the subpar Halloween remake a couple years ago. I admire the vision of some of these filmmakers, as I just said, but sometimes we need a little more. But with more remakes on the horizon, as I've been reading on the Internet Movie Database, the horror genre just looks as if it's going to keep us hanging on. Despite the effort, I got to throw my hands up and give this film 2 stars out of 5.